Hello and welcome back to the Middling Along podcast. I'm your host, Emma Thomas, and our guest this time is Jackie Jarvis. Jackie is a walking business coach and the author of Transform Your Life by Walking, about her time walking the pilgrimage routes to Santiago de Compostela. She runs business networking events and helps business owners and professionals use walking and talking as a transformational tool to stimulate clarity, change, strategy, and greater well-being. Welcome to the podcast, Jackie.
Oh, thanks, Emma. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about business networking. If someone's never heard of it, what does it actually mean in practice?
I think people would be quite familiar with what we call normal business networking, which would be, the normal routine of maybe meeting in a hotel or a venue of some sort and getting together to kind of make contacts and meet other people for business purposes, building community and relationships. And netwalking is really taking that outside. So it's really probably described as a more healthy way to network, walking up to 10,000 steps, talking with a partner, feeling quite relaxed and enjoying the fresh air and exercise whilst making those deeper connections.
And there is something, isn't there, about that kind of act of walking side by side with somebody that I think it's, I've sort of read articles or books about, it's a good way to talk to teenagers, for example, when you're not kind of facing one another, that people tend to open up a bit more. Do you find that? Because you do coaching walking as well, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. No, I find it, it's really powerful actually, because when people get to a normal networking event, there's quite a lot of discomfort sometimes that people have to kind of muscle up to somebody and start a conversation. But actually, when you set a situation up when you're just walking outside, you're looking forward, people somehow relax and become more themselves, more authentic, and really open up. So, it's very evident, on a networking event, when you see people at the start slightly awkward when they all arrive in the group, and then later on over coffee, there's a real natural buzz and people are very comfortable having shared that experience. And I think with the same with the walking coaching that I do physically when I walk with somebody, because I do it in different ways, but physically walking with somebody, they'll pretty much tell you anything and everything. And also, it's a lot easier to think when you're outside, much easier to be creative. The ideas seem to flow. And there's an energy about it that's created sometimes by the mere fact that you're putting one foot in front of the other. So overall, it's a very powerful thing to do.
Yeah, there's a lot of research, isn't there, coming out about the sort of nature connection and being either in green spaces or blue spaces, and how good that is for our sort of mental well-being as well.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot really about that. So just getting out and spending that green time. I think we all feel the energy that we get from that. If we do even just take a short walk each day, it's amazing the effect that can have mentally and physically and spiritually too.
So let's move on and talk about your book, which is called Transform Your Life by Walking. That's quite a big claim, but
It certainly is.
When did you decide that you were going to embark on doing they're called the Caminos, aren't they?
That's right. Well, I had Camino de Santiago routes are quite famous. There's been a number of TV shows. Some people listening might have seen some of them, called The Pilgrimage, certainly in the UK, with celebrities walking various sections of these routes. And, I'd heard about them. There's a film called The Way, which again was about walking these Camino routes and how transformational potentially they could be. And probably it's about 10 years ago now, I walked the first one. And that was when I was feeling particularly overloaded, as many business people in business, or as from the work you do with people going through the menopause, that can be one of those signs. You start to feel kind of overwhelmed with the smallest thing, even if you're busy. So kind of I was in that place where I felt particularly overloaded, and decided that going away and doing something like walking for a long distance over a long period of time potentially could be good for me to let go of a number of things that I needed to let go of. So it's 10 years ago I started doing a few of them, and at that time I had a partner who was also interested in doing them with me, and we experienced a number of them together. And then 5 years ago, which is the start of the Transform Your Life by Walking, my solo trips was a point at which I had actually broken up with him, and I decided, I was at that point where I thought, this is something I love doing. It's been amazing for me. Should I carry on doing it alone? Am I brave enough to do that? Or would it be too much of a reminder of the relationship that I had? So it was one of those pivotal moments where you decide, could I bear to do it alone? And I thought, actually, do you know what? I think I will. And that was really the start of what I call more of a transformational journey for me, because I had to be brave enough to go and take that step and go off on these long pilgrimages on my own. As many people who kind of want to do that, doing it is something different. When you actually do it, it can be hard to start with, but once you get going and experience it, it's amazing. So that was where the book started from, that place of going off alone. And then I started writing about it and then getting quite a lot of insight on the way for myself personally, and also things that I could share with others who may be going on a similar journey, but not necessarily walking the steps that I was walking. So,
and did you, doing that kind of solo travel as a woman, did you find that got easier the more you did it? That sort of once you got over that kind of fear factor
yeah.
of being on your own?
Yeah, I think it makes you feel quite powerful, actually, because there's many people find themselves for whatever reason on their own, and there's loads of things you want to do, and you think, well, I can't enjoy them if I'm alone, or I need the backup of being with someone else. But actually, once you do them and you prove you can do them alone, it's a very powerful place to get to, because you feel like you can do anything alone, and then you start to actually enjoy it alone as well. You see things differently. The people you meet are different. The insights you have are different. You become more fully yourself, I think, more you, and stronger and more able. You make different choices. So I think, yes, I've probably got addicted now to doing it alone. so, so whoever I'm with, I still have to go off and do a pilgrimage on my own. I do one nearly every year now, having written this book and also had the experience, the benefits that it's brought me.
And obviously there are other people doing the sort of the different routes, either alone or perhaps with a friend or a kind of family member they want to walk with, and you talk a lot in the book about sort of coming together with those people and then sort of going, sort of leaving them or saying goodbye, and then
Yeah.
potentially finding them again sort of somewhere down the road. So you're not really alone for the vast majority of the time, I suppose, unless you want to be, and you sort of shunning those people, and sort of. But a
Yeah.
big part of it was about sort of making those sort of micro friendships, if you like, with people along
Yeah.
the way.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think it depended on the route, because when you read the book, there were different routes that some of them were more remote. So I think you had to be prepared to be alone, because even though there are other people on the route, you're not with them. It's a bit like you're walking this path, a bit like in life, and people come onto that path. And I always found on the Camino, certain people kept popping up. And those were the people you were meant to have a conversation with. Maybe you're meant to learn something from them. Maybe you were enjoyed some special time with them or something. Usually there was just a handful of those people. It's a bit like life. You're not friends with everybody. And you kind of met these interesting characters on the road, and they usually had something to bring. And then it was quite hard, I think, to let go of them, like to have this feeling that everybody's on those Camino routes for themselves, walking the path for their own journey. And it was quite evident that you just had to let people go, rather than, oh, I've met someone now, I'm going to hold on to them and they're going to walk with me for the rest of the journey. It was more, I've met you. If you turn up again, great, but if you don't, we have to say goodbye. And it's quite a good attitude to have in life in general, this kind of what I call non-attachment. You allow what comes on the path, you enjoy it, you appreciate it, but you still allow people to come and go on the path. That could be applicable in business and also in personal life. So I think that was quite a powerful lesson. Every time I go alone, and then usually there are one or two really good connections that I make. A bit like a netwalking event when you think about it. You go to a networking event, you're not supposed to meet everybody.
Yeah.
You meet them, but there's maybe one or two people that resonate or you connect with, or something happens and you might do some business together, but they kind of come on the path and you just allow that. And I think walking the Camino routes, being quite spiritual, that's one of the powerful lessons, I think, from it.
And you talk about letting go of people, but you talk also about letting go of material things, and sort of that was one of the hard won lessons at the beginning of your first solo walk, that you realised that you just had too much stuff to comfortably carry.
I think there's a thing that we're often a reflection of on the outside of what's going on in the inside, and I definitely, I go off on that Camino, I think, pretty overloaded mentally, lots going on, lots of issues, lots of stuff, but I also, had a massive heavy rucksack as well, so what was on the outside was also potentially on the inside. And I think gradually, as I was walking, I realized how painful it is to carry a heavy rucksack, but that also then related to quite often how painful it is to carry a lot of heavy stuff in your head. And so what happens when you're walking these long distances day after day, not only do you feel the pain of the weight you're carrying on your back, and you're tempted to start offloading and cutting back on the things that you're actually carrying, because the lighter the load, the easier it is to walk and enjoy the journey. And there was the same process mentally. I think, we know what it's like after a busy week. You've got so much going on in your head, so many thoughts. The anxiety and the kind of overload is often about what's in here and not necessarily what's in front of you. So this period of walking day after day, week after week, eventually you become much more present in the moment, carrying a lighter load, and slowly the thoughts you just start to let go of them. And then there's this sense of being really present, really with whoever you're with, really with nature, whether you're alone or in company. And until you experience that feeling, you actually don't know what it's like. I think there's something quite going around at the moment. It's quite popular, silent walking. I was reading an article about it at the weekend, about how so many people find that hard, just to go for a walk in silence, because what's going on in their head is so noisy that they're not really silent. And I think the thing I learned from the transformational aspect of walking long distances over a long period of time, you get that feeling of what it's like to have nothing in your head. But it takes time. It's not you can't just turn it off. It's a bit like when you can't go on holiday and just suddenly relax. It just doesn't happen, does it?
Yeah. Well, we're so plugged into our devices, aren't we? I guess,
Exactly.
even if you're just doing a half an hour walk, the temptation is, oh, well, just listen to a podcast or an audio book, or I might call a friend and chat to them while I'm walking. But actually, to be able to completely turn everything off, and as you say, have that sort of that solitude is really quite hard to achieve. But I guess when you're doing, what were you sort of, sometimes you were walking upwards of 30 kilometers in one day, for many hours. That's a long time to just be alone with your thoughts, isn't it?
It is. And it's a bit like, it's I don't know, anyone that tries to meditate, for example, many people find that hard to meditate, just to sit and meditate and let go of thinking. And it's a similar thing when you're walking. It can become like a long meditation. It's very difficult to let go of all the thoughts, even the thoughts of, oh, how far is it now? Oh my God, my back aches, my feet ache, my legs ache, and all the stuff that goes on in your head. Eventually you get into this kind of position where you don't, the thoughts have gone, and you're much able to be present. And it's until you feel that, you don't know what it's like. I don't think I even knew what that was like. And now I'm more addicted to that, that piece. I still get it. I can get it now when I go out for a short 5K first thing in the morning, or an evening walk, or alone. I can still plug in, but it's almost because I've learned how to do that. But it took, the book covers, almost four years of long distance walking over different Camino routes to Santiago de Compostela, and they're quite spiritual routes. And that was all I had to think about, was what I was carrying on my back, and what I had to do the next day, where I was going to stay, what I was going to eat, and where I was going to sleep. So eventually it became a very simple life, a bit like being a monk. You were just a monk or a nun. You're just sort of getting up in the morning and you just have those simple things to think about. And really, it does energize you and it does make you feel good mentally and physically.
And what was the longest time that you were sort of away and walking?
I've done, I mean, most of the walks are in the book that I write about, more or less 2 weeks. I mean, that's the usual time that I would do. But I'm tempted. I'm doing a second volume of this. The publishers were quite interested in doing another one, so I'm at the moment doing Caminos now in different countries. So I've
How
just
many are there then? I had no idea.
they're all over. There's even Camino routes in the UK. So there's many that are being uncovered, and there is even one in Japan, which I'm thinking of doing next year, which is linked to the Camino de Santiago in Spain. So I've been investigating some of those, and possibly it looks like I'll probably do. I've done one in Sicily. Later this year, I might do one in Luxembourg. There's one being uncovered in Luxembourg, and in beginning of September, I'm going to Portugal to do one along the coastal route in Portugal, and then potentially next year the one in Japan, and maybe one in Scotland. So,
Amazing.
so I was going to do another book with these experiences of doing them in different countries, and I haven't walked for a month, but I am tempted to try and see if what it would be like to actually walk for a month and what different insights I may gain from that. So
Mm.
I know some people think, how could you do that? But actually, once you get into it, it's an amazing feeling.
Mm. And what advice would you give to anybody that was thinking about doing this, as if they were? I mean, I'm assuming you needed some reasonably sort of basic level of fitness if you're going to be tackling some fairly kind of chunky distances. But other than that,
I think if you know are a regular walker, I think a lot of people do. They know about these Camino routes, these pilgrimages, and probably many people be thinking, "Oh, I'd quite like to do that. I'll
mm,
one day I'll do it." I would say even going for a week to see whether you like it. You know, you can go on any of these different routes. The most famous is the Camino Frances, which has become more and more popular. But you can go and do a section of it, just as an
mm,
experience, get a guide. There's an app called When Camino that it's quite easy to plan the routes. And there's always a sign to follow. So in my book, with those various pictures and things of what it's like, it gives you an idea of what it could be like doing alone. And then, go and try it and see how you feel doing something like that for a week. And you don't have to I did some silly distances. I think once I did nearly 40k in a day, I think, which is silly. You don't have to do that much. You could do 10k. You
yeah,
don't have to kind of do the long distances. You can still, there's a network of places that would be available for you to stay even at 10k on
you
some of
can
the
adapt
routes,
it. Yeah.
some of the more popular routes. So it doesn't have to be this enormous distance. It's about the experience of doing it regularly, I think, and then switching off, shutting off from everything else that's going on in your life, and actually going out and giving it a go.
And what were the hardest lessons that you learned along the way?
I think probably the first one was, this whole thing of letting go. Because now when I look back, when I'm thinking of the one I'm doing, for example, in Portugal, I'm even thinking the lightest stuff that I can carry in my pack. I've only got myself a very small rucksack, a 30 litre, and
Mm,
I just don't put very much in it. So I think it represents how much I've let go of. And I think the initial, when I look back at the book even, and I can see what I was putting myself through, I think the hardest thing was probably the amount I was carrying, and actually the courage to let go of quite a lot of that, because that wasn't an instant thing. I didn't just throw the rucksack off and that was it. It was bit by bit, learning to really listen to yourself. I think listen to who you really are inside and your thoughts, and make those shifts. I would say for anyone, being conscious of that over a period of time can be hard. Sometimes it's easier to be unconscious. So doing that brought up quite a lot of things to let go of. And I think that
mm,
was probably, it feels easy now I've done it and learnt a lot of lessons, but at the time I know that it was a challenge, and it's a challenge for all of us, I think.
You did have your travel kettle though. That was your
I did.
luxury. That's so British.
I still carry that. That's the one I put in because the thing is, you can't get a cup of tea because most places in Europe don't have kettles in the rooms, not like in England. So
Got to take a little bit of England with you
yeah,
wherever you
and
go.
tea bags and your tea bags. So take those with you. Yeah.
Bare necessities. So you talked about some of the trips that you've got planned coming up, and those you're going to do. Keep walking alone, presumably.
Yes, yes. Although, there's always a chance, depending on the person, that there may be someone that I take with me. You never know. But yes, I think when I'm writing, I think the other thing is when I'm writing a book, it's quite important to have that space, to kind of get some creativity and some ideas and some insights and listen, because I think it's harder when you're walking and talking with somebody. It's powerful, but in context, when you actually go and walk alone, and a lot of people do these Camino routes really for some space, some solitude, for some silence, because
Mm.
there might be something they want to process, think about, walk through. Lots of people do it for many different reasons, and I think if you were trying to talk to someone all day long, it'd be pretty. It's pretty intense. So eventually, you want that feeling of space and peace. So,
Mm.
so
Is it
yeah,
hard to when you come back to reality? Do you sort of have a sort of period of readjustment to the kind of the noise and the bustle and the yeah.
yeah, you do. Yeah, I mean, I think when I come back, I think my house feels enormous, and I'm always decluttering because I think I've probably spent more time decluttering my house since doing these Caminos because I come back, well, I've just survived for 2 weeks with this
Mm.
tiny amount of stuff, and it's actually very liberating just to have a small amount of stuff. You realize how little you actually need. And a lot of it is want. You don't need it. And sometimes you feel a lot happier having less, but actually being grateful for and paying attention to
Mm.
more, if that makes sense. The
Yeah.
less you've got going on in your head and less stuff you have around you, the more gratitude and pleasure you get from simple things, really, which
Mm.
I think there definitely is a period of readjustment. The desire not to have too much technology around and, just to be free of that really and be out in nature. And, it's definitely changed a lot of the way I think and the way I operate.
Yeah, quite often we're sort of holding on to things just in case, aren't we? And
Yeah.
then suddenly you do get back after a long period of time like that and sort of look around and think, goodness me, why have I got all these things that I'm just holding on to for
Yeah.
different reasons?
Well, that's it. I mean, I think I would go through my rucksack and really, kind of think about each thing. Like, what's that going to do? Can that, pair of leggings double up, in double use, or how heavy is it to carry, is it going to impact, rather than just stuffing everything in and thinking, oh, I need that, and then that translates into your own life, how much, in business, what do you actually need to be successful, what's working, what isn't. We hold on to so many things in business in the same way, relationships, people, stuff that isn't really working. We try to do too much. And then really when you take that step back and you think, well, is this actually working or not? And I think I've definitely translated quite a few of the lessons from the Camino walking to business, to think, well, okay, what do I really want to do? What will make me really happy? And what actually is going to make this work? And then sticking to a few routes to that, as opposed to having many different paths that you're trying to, to walk down or juggling many different things.
Mm.
So I've definitely focused my business much more since, and also to a certain extent help clients do the same when I'm helping them with their business growth, so that it actually is a balanced life as opposed to just a busy business.
Mm. And I think the other thing that you talk about in the book is this sort of trusting the process and kind of going with the flow of things. And I think definitely for some of us, well, I'm putting my hand up, we like to have a plan, and we're kind of like,
Yeah.
it's kind of uncomfortable when things don't go according to plan and quite stressful. But there was a lot of there were many days where things didn't go according to your plan, and you just kind of had to to go with
Yeah.
it and trust that it would work out.
Yeah, I think that is one of the Camino lessons. Definitely is you're walking a path. There are signs. Sometimes you can't see them. You have to trust. You have to keep going in order to, you could be in the middle of nowhere. I mean, these little yellow arrows pop up. I can remember being on mountains, in the fog, looking for this little arrow, lost in woods, all sorts of different things. And there weren't other people around, but you had to keep trusting that the sign would appear if you just kept walking.
Mm.
And then you were aware of these signs on the path. And I think if we translate that into our business lives, we're all walking a path. Sometimes we change direction. Sometimes we need to go back to go forward. And there are always signs on the path, signs that we're on the right track or the wrong track. And I think it's that awareness, isn't it, of what is happening, and a trust that sometimes things will work out in the way we try too hard. I know I've suffered from really trying too hard, working too hard, pushing
Mm.
too hard, trying to make something work when it obviously wasn't, and I've let go a lot of that. And there is an element of course, you need a plan. It's a bit like I wouldn't walk the Camino without getting the guidebook, the app, packing my rucksack, thinking about where I was going, maybe booking a few places. You need that structure. But then when you get there and you've got that plan, there's a sense of just enjoying the process and allowing whatever happens on that journey to happen, and learn as you go, like allow it to flow. And I think in the business is the same, providing you've kind of worked out where you're going, what direction you want to go in, who's your right client to work with, where you're going to find them, and get some structure into that strategic plan. And then you need to enjoy it, because always kind of looking backwards or forwards without actually enjoying that path can spoil the journey, can't it?
Mm. And are there any sort of top moments that stand out for you that were sort of, days that will stay with you, or sort of, just experiences along the way, whether that's a sort of people or places that.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. There's certainly people that stand out, but I think there was one experience, the one on the Camino Primitivo, where we walked through the fog into the light. I think I called it that. And there was a little group that left because it was quite dangerous. It was a kind of mountainous route. And, it was kind of, we were told, if you really want to go up to the top of this, it was the Hospitalis route on the Primitivo. Got to be careful, especially if it's foggy. And we kind of were making a decision: are we going to go or not go? And we all said, there was a little group of people, and we said, well, if we stick together, we'll be okay. And so we all set off together. But then somehow I got lost, or I broke away from this group, and there was someone else that broke away, a guy called Don, an Irish guy who lives in Spain, and I bumped into him a number of times on the route. He was not with me at the time, but we both got separated in different ways from this group, and we were both almost like lost on this mountain
Lost
fog.
sheep.
And I didn't know whether to turn back, and I think he didn't. I ended up turning back, and then suddenly I saw his little face in the fog. And so we kind of got together, and we were kind of deciding what we're going to do. We're going to try and trust the path? Are we just going to walk forward? What are we going to do? We don't know how to get back anyway. So we both decided we were just going to trust this path, and we're going to keep walking. And so we did, and we saw these little tiny signs occasionally, but really we didn't know where we were going. We couldn't see a thing. And eventually we got up to the top of this mountain, and it was one of those moments where we arrived at just the right moment, when the fog was clearing at the top of this route. And as we came out, there's pictures in the book of this, as we came out of the top, it was as if we were walking on top of clouds. It's difficult to explain, but we kind of came out, and we were like walking along the top of this ridge, and the kind of clouds lifted and the sun came out. It was really spiritual. It's like one of those moments where it was an absolutely amazing view, and also
playing in the background.
it was after the stress of that journey, and just feeling like we've got to just keep stepping forward. I think we were the only people in the group to see that, because we just hit it at that moment. And I think Don shouted out, I think, "Oh, I'm so happy," like we spent that moment up at the top. And I think both of us kind of went, it's really worth it. Sometimes it's worth taking a risk, trusting yourself, trusting in the path. And then the result was a beautiful light and some great insight, and also some great company. I'm still in touch with Don. He's actually helping me learn Spanish at the moment. So he's become a great buddy. And that moment together, we often talk about it, how we got there and, what happened. There was many others, but that was just one that stands out.
Fantastic. Well, look forward to seeing where your adventures take you over the next 5 years.
Yeah.
I'll share links in the show notes to where people can find you and your different platforms and different guises. So thanks so much for coming and talking to us about the book. We'll put a link in as well so that people can find a copy of that if they're interested in quite literally following in your footsteps. But yeah, thanks so much for coming to talk to us, Jackie.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Emma. It's been great.
You've been listening to the Middling Along podcast. Do remember to subscribe to be notified when our next episode is live, and why not visit the blog at www.middlingalong.com to sign up to my newsletter as well. I do hope you enjoyed listening today. If you did, I'd be really grateful if you would consider leaving a short review, as that helps people find the podcast and helps get it noticed. Hope you can join us next time. Goodbye for now.